Celira stood at the expansive window of New Alexandria Station, observing the ships as they departed and arrived. Her once flawless purple skin had lost its luster, and her ceremonial robes, worn for the third consecutive day, displayed minor signs of wear. 5 years ago, she would have discarded them at the first hint of a wrinkle, but that was before her family's fall from grace. The immense space station floated like a gem in the cosmos, hosting thousands of beings from countless worlds. In better times, she had traversed these corridors as part of the elite, turning heads with her beauty and status. Now those same beings, who once bowed to her family name, hurried past, pretending not to notice her. "Your food credit has been declined, madam," the service robot had informed her that morning. It was her last credit chip, and now she couldn't even afford a simple meal. The weight of her predicament felt like a heavy shroud on her shoulders. She watched a group of humans stroll by, laughing and chatting among themselves. Unlike the other species on the station, they didn't wear rank markers or status symbols. A simple maintenance worker could converse with a high-ranking official without anyone batting an eye. This was what sparked her idea. Among the humans was Marcus Chen. She had observed him for the past week. He worked as a diplomatic aide, or so his badge indicated, but he didn't behave like the other diplomatic staff. He assisted elderly aliens with their bags, shared his lunch with station children, and seemed to know everyone's name. Most importantly, he was single. Celira's enhanced vision, a gift from her noble lineage, could discern every detail of his face from her vantage point. He wasn't especially handsome by human standards. Average height, simple black hair, and kind eyes behind smart glasses. But she had witnessed how he treated others, and that was worth more than mere looks. "It's time," she murmured to herself, smoothing her robes one last time. Her plan was straightforward, born from desperation. In Centurion society, a fallen noble was deemed worse than a commoner. No one would marry her, hire her, or even speak to her. But humans didn't concern themselves with such matters. They believed in something called social mobility, the unusual notion that anyone could elevate their status through hard work. She followed Marcus at a distance, watching him stop at his usual coffee shop. The owner, an elderly Martian with 4 arms, always had his drink ready before he arrived. Day was no exception. "Thanks, Mrs. VEC," Marcus said, accepting his cup with a smile. "How's your daughter's science project coming along?" Celira took a deep breath. This was her opportunity. She moved forward, timing her steps to accidentally bump into him. But as she approached, her leg trembled from hunger and weakness. Instead of a gentle collision, she stumbled hard against him. Hot coffee splattered across the floor. Marcus caught her before she could fall, his hands steady and firm. Hey, are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern etched on his face. Looking up into his eyes, Celira felt her meticulously crafted speech vanish. She saw no judgment in his gaze, no disgust at touching a fallen noble, just worry for a stranger who might be hurt. She began, but swayed again. Games. The lack of food was impacting her more than she had anticipated. "Mrs. VEC," Marcus called out. "Could we get some water and something to eat? I think someone needs assistance." As her vision blurred, Celira realized her perfect plan had just unraveled, but somehow, as Marcus helped her to a seat, she wondered if that might not be such a terrible outcome after all. "Please eat slowly," Marcus said, watching Celira try to maintain her noble manners while clearly starving. They sat in a quiet corner of Mrs. VEC's coffee shop, away from curious eyes. Celira's hands trembled as she picked up the sandwich. In her culture, eating in public was considered low class, but hunger had eroded her pride. The first bite nearly brought her to tears. It had been 2 days since her last proper meal. "Thank you," she said softly, her accent lending a musical quality to her words. "I will repay you when—" Marcus raised his hand, halting her. "No need. Friends help each other." Friends. The word felt foreign on her tongue. In the Centurion Empire, nobles didn't have friends. They had allies, servants, or rivals, nothing in between. Mrs. VEC brought over 2 cups of hot tea, her 4 arms moving gracefully. "On the house," she said with a wink of her central eye. "Any friend of Marcus is family here." As they sat in comfortable silence, Celira studied Marcus more intently. His uniform was clean but not extravagant. His watch was simple metal, not the renowned brands other diplomats wore. Everything about him seemed ordinary, yet people greeted him warmly as they passed. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her rehearsed plan of seduction now feeling foolish. "You don't know me?" Marcus smiled, adjusting his glasses. "Someone once helped me when I was down on my luck. Taught me that kindness should be passed forward, not repaid." Quote, dot. A group of Centurion nobles walked past the shop window. Celira tensed, turning her face away. They were from her former social circle, people who had dined at her family's table and sworn eternal friendship. Now they would sooner spit on her than acknowledge her existence. Marcus noticed her reaction. "You're from the upper spires, aren't you?" he asked gently. "I recognize the accent." Quote, dot. Celira's heart raced. This was it. He would realize her fallen status and leave, just like everyone else. I was, she admitted, bracing for rejection. Instead, Marcus leaned forward with interest. "Must be quite a story, but you don't have to tell me if you don't want to." His simple acceptance broke something inside her. Words spilled out before she could restrain them. "My family lost everything in the trade wars. Father backed the wrong noble house, and when they fell." She stared at her tea, watching ripples form from her trembling hands. "In our society, failure taints everything. No one will hire me, house me, or even speak to me. I'm less than nothing." Quote, dot. "That's nonsense," Marcus said firmly. "You're a person, not a credit rating." Celira looked up, startled by his tone. "You don't understand. In my culture—" "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "I've studied enough cultures to know that some traditions hurt more than help. But you're on a human station now. Here, everyone gets a second chance." Quote, dot. He pulled out a small datapad and started typing. "I know some people in the biology department. With your noble education, you must know a lot about Centurion physiology and customs. They're always looking for cultural consultants." Quote, dot. Celira stared at him, bewildered. This wasn't how her plan was supposed to unfold. She had intended to charm him, to play the mysterious alien beauty. Instead, he was offering her something far more valuable than marriage, a chance to stand on her own 2 feet. "Why?" she whispered. Marcus smiled again, and this time she noticed how it made his ordinary face seem somehow beautiful. "Because everyone deserves a chance to write their own story." Quote, dot. For the first time since her family's downfall, Celira felt something new blossom in her chest. 1 week had transformed everything. The xenobiology department hired her as a consultant, and she now had her own small room in the station's residential area. It wasn't much, just a bed, desk, and bathroom, but it was hers. More importantly, she had earned it herself. Marcus had become a daily presence in her life. He would bring coffee in the mornings before work, and they often shared lunch in the station's garden area. Today was different, though. Today she had to confront her past. "The Centurion trade minister is visiting the station," Marcus told her as they walked through the bustling hallway. "I should avoid the diplomatic section for a few days, but fate had other plans." As they turned a corner, they came face to face with a group of Centurion nobles. Leading them was Vorath Kara's former fiancée. Time seemed to freeze. Vorath's purple skin darkened with recognition, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her walking alongside a human. The nobles behind him whispered and pointed. "Well, well," Vorath said in the Centurion high language. "The fallen princess consorting with lesser beings. How far you have fallen." "Celira." Marcus stepped forward, but she grabbed his arm. She couldn't let him defend her. It would only worsen the situation. Instead, she did the only thing her culture allowed. She looked through Vorath as if he didn't exist and walked past him. "Keep walking," she whispered to Marcus. "Please." Quote, dot. But Vorath wasn't finished. This downed him. "Running away again, just like your father ran when his crimes were discovered?" Celira halted. Her hands trembled, but not from fear this time. "My father was innocent," she said quietly, still not turning around. "You know that. Your family framed him." The corridor fell silent. Even humans and other aliens sensed the tension. "Careful," Vorath sneered. "Such accusations could worsen your situation. Though I suppose that's why you're trying to trap this human into marriage, isn't it? I've heard about your little meetings." Quote, dot. Marcus gently removed Celira's hand from his arm. When he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. More official. Minister Vorath, I believe you're late for your meeting with station security. ... Vorath laughed. I have no such meeting. ... Actually, you do. Marcus pulled out his station badge, and for the first time, Celira saw his full title, Chief of Societal Intelligence. We've been investigating some intriguing financial transfers between your family and certain pirate groups. Would you like to discuss them here or in my office? The color drained from Vorath's face. Without another word, he and his group hurried away. Celira stared at Marcus, her world spinning. You're not just a diplomatic aide? Marcus led her to a quiet alcove. I'm sorry for not telling you everything. I work for Earth Intelligence, studying how different species interact. We've been building a case against Vorath's family for months. ... Then you knew about me? About my father? He nodded. We knew your father was framed. We're close to proving it too. ... Tears filled Celira's eyes. All this time I thought I was trying to. She couldn't finish. I know, Marcus said gently. You were trying to save yourself through marriage, but I wanted to show you that you could save yourself in other ways. ... Why help me at all? Marcus smiled, that simple, warm smile she had come to cherish. At first, because it was my job to understand Centurion culture, and because you were brave enough to try changing your destiny. And now, he took her hand, now because I care about what happens to you. For the first time in her life, Celira felt truly seen, not as a noble, not as a fallen woman, but as herself. 2 days after the confrontation with Vorath, as Celira sat in Marcus's office surrounded by holographic displays of financial data, the room wasn't large, but it had a spectacular view of the station's docking base. Look at this, Marcus said, pointing to a complex web of transactions. Your father's signature was forged on these documents. The AI analysis proves it. His eyes sparkled with excitement behind his glasses. We're getting closer to clearing his name. Celira tried to focus on the numbers, but her mind kept wandering. The past few days had been surreal. Other Centurions on the station had begun treating her differently. Not with respect exactly, but with curiosity. Word had spread about her confrontation with Vorath. Marcus, she said suddenly, why didn't you arrest him that day? He turned away from the displays. Because sometimes catching the small fish doesn't help you catch the big ones. Vorath is just a puppet. We want the people really responsible for your father's exile. ... A comfortable silence fell between them. Celira watched a large passenger ship dock, its lights twinkling against the darkness of space. I should tell you something, she said finally. Now, when I first approached you that day in the coffee shop, I had a plan. ... Marcus smiled. You mean your plan to marry me for protection? Huh. She stared at him, mouth agape. You knew? It wasn't hard to figure out. Fallen, noble, desperate situation, suddenly interested in a seemingly minor human official. He chuckled softly. I studied enough about your culture to understand why you'd think that was your only option. ... Celira felt her face flush with shame. I'm sorry, I actually... Marcus interrupted her. I have a different kind of proposal for you. Her heart skipped a beat. What? He pressed a button, and a new hologram appeared. A legal document. How would you like to help us expose the corruption in your empire? Celira read the document carefully. It was a contract offering her a position as a cultural advisor to Earth Intelligence, complete with diplomatic immunity and protection. This is a chance to clear your father's name properly, Marcus finished, and maybe help change some things that need changing in your society. ... It could be dangerous, she said, but her eyes were fixed on the document. Very. Some powerful people will be angry. That's why... He paused, seeming nervous for the first time since she'd known him. That's why I think we should get married. ... Celira's head snapped up. What? Not for the reasons you originally planned, he said quickly, but because marriage would give you additional legal protections under both human and Centurion law. He adjusted his glasses, a gesture she now recognized as a sign he was gathering courage. And because I think we work well together. ... She stared at him, trying to comprehend. You want to marry me for legal protection and good teamwork? And because I care about you, he added softly. That part's important too. A laugh bubbled up from deep within her. The first genuine laugh since her family's downfall. It was so perfectly human, so perfectly Marcus. Not a marriage of desperate necessity or political advantage, but one of practical benefits and genuine feelings intertwined. In my culture, she said, still smiling, this would be considered a very strange proposal. Is that a no? Celira looked at the legal document, then at Marcus, then at the stars beyond the windows. She thought about her old life, of rigid rules and false friends, and her new life of coffee shops and honest work, and a human who saw her true worth. No, she said, it's a yes to both proposals. Marcus's face lit up with that simple, beautiful smile she had come to love. Good, he said, taking her hand, because I already have a plan to use our wedding to trap Vorath's superior. Celira laughed again. It was going to be a very interesting marriage indeed. News of Celira's engagement to Marcus spread through New Alexandria Station like wildfire. Within 3 days, it reached the Centurion Empire's capital world. They're sending a noble intervention team, Celira exclaimed, bursting into Marcus's office one morning. Her purple skin had turned almost white with fear. My sister just sent a secret warning. Marcus looked up from his desk, instantly alert. How long do we have? They'll be here tomorrow. Father's old rival, High Lord Kovac, is leading them himself. She collapsed into a chair. This is bad, Marcus. Really bad. Noble intervention teams were the Empire's method of preventing unsuitable marriages. They had the legal authority to take any noble, even a fallen one, into protective custody for their own good. But Marcus remained calm. He even smiled a little. Actually, he said, this is perfect. We've been waiting for Kovac to leave his protected territory. Calm. Celira stared at him. You knew they would come? Calm. We counted on it. He pressed a button on his desk, and Commander Sarah Wong of Station Security appeared on the screen. It's time, Commander. Operation Wedding Crashers is go. The next morning, a sleek Centurion ship docked at the station. High Lord Kovac emerged with 6 guards, his elaborate robes sparkling with precious stones. He looked like a peacock next to the simply dressed humans in the docking bay. Where is she? He demanded. A young human officer stepped forward. Hi, Lord Kovac. Welcome to New Alexandria. I'm Lieutenant Park. The couple you're seeking is in Wedding Hall 3, preparing for their ceremony. Kovac's face darkened. They dared to proceed. Take me there immediately. The wedding hall was stunning, adorned with both human and Centurion traditions. Celira stood in her white dress with purple ribbons, her hand trembling as she heard the approaching footsteps. The doors burst open. Kovac stormed in, his guards fanning out behind him. This farce ends now, he shouted. Celira, you will return to the Empire for rehabilitation. This human has clearly corrupted you. Marcus, wearing his formal Earth Intelligence uniform, stepped forward. Actually, High Lord Kovac, you're right on time. You're under arrest. Kovac laughed. You dare? I have diplomatic immunity. Not for crimes against humanity, Commander Wong said, stepping out from behind a pillar. More security officers emerged from hiding places around the hall. We have evidence that you ordered pirate attacks on human colonies to damage Lord Sar's trading routes before framing him for those same attacks. The color drained from Kovac's face. You have no proof? Actually, Celira said, her voice steady, we do. Those pirates you hired were human undercover agents? And this wedding? It's been a trap all along. Kovac's guards reached for their weapons but halted when they saw they were completely surrounded. Your own greed trapped you, Marcus explained. We knew you couldn't resist coming in person to stop a fallen noble from marrying a human. Your hatred of both made you predictable. Commander Wong stepped forward with restraints. Hi, Lord Kovac. You're under arrest for crimes against humanity, conspiracy, and economic terrorism. As Kovac was led away, shouting threats, Celira turned to Marcus, astonished. I can't believe it worked. Of course it worked, he said, taking her hand. But there's just one small detail. She looked at him, puzzled. What? He gestured at the decorated hall, the gathered witnesses, and their formal attire. Well, since we're all dressed up and the hall is paid for. He smiled, that warm smile she loved. Want to get married for real? Huh. Salira laughed, tears of joy in her eyes. Now that's a proper proposal. Behind them, Mrs. VEC dabbed at her eyes with all four hands. I'll get the coffee ready for the reception, she said, sniffling happily. 1 month after Kovac's arrest, Salira stood before the Centurion High Council. The holographic link to the massive chamber, with its towering crystal pillars and ancient symbols, made her feel small. Even through the projection. You understand what you're asking? The High Chancellor's voice echoed through the hall. To allow nobles to marry outside their class? Even outside our species? It goes against thousands of years of traditions. Salira gripped Marcus's hand tightly beside her. They had prepared for this moment for weeks. Honorable Chancellor, she said, her voice steady, I stand before you, not just as a noble's daughter, but as someone who has seen both sides of our society. When my family fell, I learned that worth isn't born, it's built. Clock. Quote, dot. The council members whispered among themselves. On the public viewing screens across the empire, millions watched. The story had captivated people's imagination. The fallen noble who married a human and helped expose corruption at the highest levels. And what of your human husband? Another council member asked. Does he understand our ways? Quote. Marcus stepped forward. Honorable Council, I've spent years studying your culture. It's beautiful and rich with history. But even the strongest tree must bend in the wind, or it will break. Salira squeezed his hand, proud of his perfect Centurion accent. They had practiced for hours. You speak of change, the Chancellor said, but what of order? Our hierarchy maintains peace. Quote, does it? Salira asked softly. She pressed a button, and images appeared before the council. Pictures of impoverished centurions in the outer colonies, of talented youngsters denied education because of their birth, of corruption hidden behind tradition. These are our people too, she said. Every time we reject someone for their birth or species, we lose something precious. Look at what humans have achieved by giving everyone a chance. Their ships reach further, their ideas grow faster, their society adapts where we stagnate. Suddenly, a new voice rang out. My daughter speaks truth! Salira's heart stopped. From the council chamber's entrance emerged a tall figure she hadn't seen in years. Her father, Lord Krufer, had finally returned from exile. Father, she whispered. He walked to the center of the chamber, his head held high despite his simple clothes. High Chancellor, my daughter and her human husband did what our entire system could not. They exposed corruption and brought justice. They proved that change doesn't mean destruction. It means growth. Quote. The chamber erupted in voices. On the public screens, crowds gathered in cities across the empire, filled with hope. Salira saw young nobles standing with commoners, saw mixed species couples holding hands, saw her people ready for change. The Chancellor raised his hand for silence. Lord Salira, the evidence provided by Earth intelligence has cleared your name. Your title and lands are restored. He paused, looking at Salira and Marcus. And perhaps your daughter's revolution deserves consideration. Salira felt tears in her eyes as her father bowed to her through the hologram. He turned to Marcus and bowed again. Thank you, he said in careful English, for seeing my daughter's worth when our world had forgotten it. Marcus smiled his simple, warm smile. Sir, your daughter taught me more about worth than any diplomatic training ever could. Quote. The Chancellor stood. We'll need time to consider these changes. But, he looked directly at Salira, we will consider them. Perhaps it is time for the Empire to learn from other worlds, especially Earth. As the transmission ended, Salira turned to Marcus. Do you think they'll really change? He pulled her close. Change is already happening. Look at us. She laughed. A fallen noble and a secret agent. No, he said softly. Two people who proved that love doesn't care about ranks or species. Above them, through the station's enormous windows, stars twinkled like promises of a brighter future. Work. 1 year later, Celera stood in Mrs. VEC's coffee shop, now twice its original size, and renamed the First Contact Cafe. The walls were adorned with photos of mixed-species couples who had followed in her and Marcus's footsteps. "Another Centurion human wedding," Mrs. VEC said, her forearms busy preparing drinks. "That's the third this month." Celera smiled, touching her own wedding photo on the wall. "Who could have guessed that my desperate plan to marry a human would spark a cultural revolution?" Quote. The shop's door chimed. Marcus walked in, still in his Earth Intelligence uniform, but now wearing the additional badge of Cultural Exchange Director. "You're late," Celera greeted him. "Sorry," he said, kissing her cheek. "I was helping a Centurion noble son apply to Earth University. Can you believe it? A year ago that would have been a scandal." Quote, they sat at their usual table by the window. Outside, New Alexandria Station had transformed too. The once rigid separation between species had vanished. Humans worked alongside Centurions, shared meals together, even lived in the same sections. "Message from Father," Celera said, showing Marcus her datapad. "The Education Reform Bill passed. Now any Centurion can attend the Imperial Academy, regardless of birth." Marcus grinned. "Your father's really embracing his role as the reform movement's leader?" "He says he learned it from his daughter." As Celera watched a group of young Centurions walk past, wearing a mix of traditional robes and human-style clothes, she thought, "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed." "Lady Celera," a voice called. A young Centurion girl rushed into the shop, her purple skin glowing with excitement. "Is it true? Did you really marry a human because you saw his worth beyond his status?" Before Celera could respond, the girl's mother hurried in. "I'm so sorry," she said. "She's read your story 100 times. You're her hero." "Our story," Celera corrected, taking Marcus's hand. "And it's not just about us anymore. It's about everyone who dares to follow their heart." The girl beamed. "I want to be a human doctor when I grow up. Mother says now I can study on Earth." After they left, Miss VEC brought over 2 special drinks, the cross-cultural coffee she'd named after them. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "you two did more than change the Empire. You changed how everyone sees everyone else." She was right. The success of human-Centurion relationships had inspired other species to question their own rigid traditions. The station had become a symbol of what was possible when people looked past surface differences. "Oh," Marcus said suddenly. "I almost forgot." He pulled out a small box. "Hasty. Happy anniversary." Inside was a beautiful pendant, half Earth crystal, half Centurion gem. "Perfect balance," Celera whispered, touching it gently. "Like us," Marcus said, "not despite our differences, but because of them." "Won't." The station's announcement system crackled. "Attention! The Earth Centurion Cultural Exchange Program is now accepting new applications. All species welcome." Celera looked around the busy cafe at the mixed couples, the shared laughter, the blending of worlds she had once thought forever separate. She thought of that desperate girl she had been, believing marriage to a human was her only escape. Instead, she had found something far better. True love, real change, and a bridge between worlds. "Marcus," she said softly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't spilled your coffee that day?" He gave her that same warm smile that had first touched her heart. "I think we would have found each other anyway. Some things are just meant to be." Outside, the stars sparkled, witnesses to a new era where love knew no boundaries. Worth wasn't measured by birth, and a desperate plan had transformed into a revolution of the heart. In the end, Celera hadn't just married a human. She had helped create a future where no one would ever have to plead for acceptance again.